All right, good morning, everybody. First things first, I want to issue a public apology. I in no way wanted to insinuate any kind of insult to the NYPD as an institution by certain statements that I wrote, whether on Facebook or on Twitter yesterday. That doesn't absolve the individuals that I might have used maybe the wrong word about, and I probably would have used a much more harsh word. But it's a very complicated thing that happened yesterday, and I also don't want to in any way insinuate that Mayor de Blasio, as much as I disagree with him on every level politically, I do not believe he's an anti-Semite. Let's get that out of the way. Did he say something? Did he write something that was that? If the point was not that, and so let's go through this in order, right? Two things can be right and true at the same time. When I heard that Rabbi Mertz, Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha, passed away yesterday, the first thing I thought was, not yesterday, 2 days ago, Sunday, the first thing I thought was, please don't make a big funeral. Please, 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 don't make a big funeral. What happened? First things first was, everybody thought they're doing the right thing. Shoimrim, which is the neighborhood watch in Williamsburg, they arranged with the police department. The police department blocked off the street. They felt like they're doing everything right, which might have been short-sighted, but the way they figured was, people are allowed to be outside. People are out in the parks. People are out. We're not having the funeral in the synagogue, which is what we usually would do. Generally we don't do funerals in synagogues. Most funerals are done in funeral homes. But when a rabbi passes away, his funeral is done in his synagogue. And sometimes other major people in the community might also have the funeral in the synagogue. And in general, either otherwise, I'm talking about when there's not the COVID-19. In general, most people have a funeral, either only a graveside funeral, which both of my grandparents had. They didn't have any kind of a chapel service, which I think personally is, more apropos, in my opinion, and that if it's when it's a rabbi of the synagogue, Rachmana litzlan, we shouldn't have to know from these things. The levaya starts at least from the synagogue, and sometimes I remember when I lived in Queens, I went to a shul with a lot of Holocaust survivors, and generally, if one of them passed away, the funeral took place in the shul. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. It happened to be a smaller shul, actually, but it is what it is. Now, but generally, someone like Rabbi Mertz had a rather nice-sized synagogue. One of the larger, maybe one of the top 20 big synagogues in Williamsburg. He was a holy man, and I remember him. I remember seeing him here in White Lake, in the summer when he used to come here. Last year he got his own bungalow colony, because he, as Gavorna Goyser Rebbe, and so, and that's pretty much, what would have happened if there wasn't the COVID-19. There would have been, the funeral would have taken place in the synagogue, and most likely there would have been a lot more people The synagogue would have been filled to whatever capacity, and there would have been loudspeakers, and there would have been a lot of people out on the streets surrounding. Like I remember when the Satmar Rebbe, the Berech Moshe, passed away in 2006. I went to Williamsburg. You can actually find on my YouTube channel the little clips that I took there at the funeral. And the whole Williamsburg, they were all out in the street for the funeral of Berech Moshe, and I managed to get into the synagogue also, and Azay's Gevein, and that's it's typical. I didn't go to Sklener Rebbe's funeral as much as I loved the Sklener Rebbe, but the whole borough park was filled. Everybody was out in the street to show their respect to Sklener Rebbe. Was tzaddik of Borough Park, of the world, the tzaddik ador. Anyway, everything was organized with the police, including the fact that the police said, make it as quickly as possible. They gave permission for this, meaning, I don't know why they gave permission. This is what, and so the assumption was that just everybody, they would close off the streets so they could maintain social distancing. Everybody would be out on the street. Anybody who didn't have a mask would be given a mask. And the whole thing was going to take 5 minutes, say a few psalms. People, they're going out on the street. They're not meeting in the synagogue. You're allowed to be on the street, And this was the assumption. Now, I personally, as much as I respected Rabbi Mertz, I would not have gone. And I would have, if anybody would have asked me, not that anybody asks me these things, maybe one or two people in Williamsburg ask me these things. I do have a few Hasidim in Williamsburg, and I don't mean just people who like me, but I mean like real Hasidim who respect my words and will ask me eitzes and things. And the one who I spoke to yesterday, he told me he didn't even know about the Levaya until it was, until afterwards, So, there's really something going on here, making a mountain out of a molehill. But what was expected was all right. The one thing was I think when they mentioned the synagogue put out a statement. They said, they had planned to have speakers at the funeral. I don't know if they meant loudspeakers or people speaking. But then the police said, no, you can't have it. And they followed, they gefolgt, meaning everything that was arranged with the police department was done. Now, I don't understand why the police department said they could do it. And still, it sounds to me like some kind of setup. It sounds to me like it could be a conspiracy, like it's entrapment. Or at least now, because you see now what's going on. And I used the word yesterday, lazy. And again, I don't mean that the whole NYPD are lazy. But there's certainly going to be a few bad apples, and even good people can be lazy too. I'm a very lazy person. I try to work on it, but it's really hard. I've always been lazy, and I try to, my son tells me I'm lazy because I don't edit my videos. I just talk. And he said that's why nobody wants to watch my videos because I'm lazy. But anyway, I don't have time to edit my videos. Editing videos takes a really long time. I'm certainly going to get out much more material doing it this way. And it was interesting. I was watching Rabbi Bart Sadok last night, and his dog was barking or something. He's like, "You see, this is live. I don't edit my videos." I was watching it. I wasn't watching it live. I was watching it after he posted it. But he was like, "You see, I want to show you. This is the real deal. I don't edit my videos." But he's more talented than I am. I mean, he's a lot smarter than I am. But anyway, and he has a lot more knowledge than I do too. knowledge and wisdom. But anyway, with what happened yesterday, again, I wish they didn't make a big funeral. But it really wasn't that big. Even, let's say there were 2,000 people there, which I don't believe there was. I don't think there was even 1,000. But let's say there were 2,000, which is what people are claiming. Now, first of all, the other thing is, you're talking about social distancing. Social distancing is between, if you're in the same household, families, you don't have to social distance. You know, it was mostly teenage boys. And you know, it's very, you know, you might see a group of 6 or 7 boys who are not social distancing, and then there's 6 feet between them and the next group. You know, because these people are all related. You know, they don't have to social distance. They all live in the same house. You have families in Williamsburg with 15 kids. You know, so that's, you know, there's a lot of things going on here. But the other thing is, most people in Williamsburg, I believe, had it already. You know, that's kind of my, I mean, I'm assuming, even though I didn't, the only symptoms I had was the toe symptoms, which I just heard about yesterday, that people have something like frostbite on their toes, and I experienced that. So I'm hoping that means I had it. It's out of my system, because, you know, my wife was tested. She came negative. I really want to get the antibody test. And I don't live in Brooklyn. I don't live in Monroe. I wasn't visiting these places where everybody has this. I really, the only place for 5 weeks, the only place I went was the grocery store. And I didn't, you know, I haven't been to synagogue since Purim, you know. And I'm proud of that, you know. I haven't davened with the minion since Purim. Purim is already, you know, 7 weeks ago, more, 8 weeks ago, almost. Not 8 weeks yet. 8 weeks is 7 weeks ago was the last time I davened with the minion, and I'm proud of that. And really, that's what we're supposed to be doing, you know. But the truth is, again, you know, if you have the whole family, a father and sons, or maybe a grandfather who had it already, and his sons and grandsons, and you very easily have 10 a minion, or someone else, you know, they had it, there's really no problem. You know, you had it already. I know people are saying, well, maybe you could get it again, this and that. It's very unlikely. That's already grasping at straws. So, you know, but now what I heard is in Williamsburg, on each block you have 5 cop cars. Again, there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with that you have 5 cop cars on each block in Williamsburg. One on each block should be more than enough. There's something, I mean, I use that word lazy. There's something wrong that you could have 5 cop cars in Williamsburg to make sure people are wearing masks, and yet, you know, the guys who were let out of Rikers Island, who committed crimes 2 days later, really violent, horrible crimes, 2 days later, somehow you don't have police presence for that. And there is something wrong with that. You know, there is something wrong with, you know, making a bigger deal about parking tickets and things than violent crime. You know, I mean, obviously, yes, you have people who, that's their job. You have meter maids, that's their job. That's a different thing. But, you know, and I understand also that, I mean, a sergeant in the state police in New York told me, he said that 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10 traffic stops that are made catch a real bad guy. So I understand that, you know. There's that's useful. That's doing what you're supposed to be doing, and 99% of the time, that's what the police are doing. But there's something wrong. I'm happy that that the synagogue, that Rabbi Mertz's synagogue, issued an apology. That was the right thing to do. That was really classy. Um, you know, um, and they took the blame for it. And they didn't blame the mayor, and they didn't blame the police. They took the blame, and that was classy, and that was right. Um, but like I said, two things could be right at the same time. Now, a lot of people are bringing up something else. They're saying, well, look, the Novominsker Rebbe didn't have a big funeral. All he had was, just his family buried him graveside. Not even sure if there was a minyan there or not. And and then they had on YouTube, they had on Zoom or whatever. I watched it. They had a few weeks later, they because it was now it's after the month of Nisan, and we can say Hespedim now. It was interesting. That was one thing that kind of upset me, was that when they were making a lot of funerals, it was the month of Nisan, when we don't say eulogies traditionally. What we generally do is we'll say some kind of speech and just preface it by saying this is not a eulogy. And again, it depends on the community. In Lubavitch, they never say eulogies. Each community has their own customs as far as this is concerned. Although the thing is, I've seen Lubavitcher Shluchim say eulogies. So not every one of them is such a chosid, which is good. Halavai, more Lubavitchers wouldn't be such big chassidim. If we had more Yossel Kranzes who were just modern Orthodox rabbis who call themselves Chabad. I'm sorry, I digress. But the point what I'm trying to bring out here is so the Novominsker Rebbe didn't have a big funeral. He had a month, 3 weeks later, he had a funeral on Zoom, meaning he was buried right away, and they said the eulogies on the internet, right, on Torah Anytime. That's where I watched it. Was Torah Anytime, and people are on the social media. They're comparing the two. Now, I don't mean this in any way to denigrate the holy Novominsker Rebbe. I love the Novominsker Rebbe. Every time I saw him, it was only a handful of times. I never spoke to him again, but I heard him speak in person. Gave him shalom once or twice maybe, and I remember that very well. And I'm not getting into politics with Agudas Yisrael and this and that. That's stupid. And also, he wasn't, a politician. He was a real manig. He was a special person, and he was a real Rebbe. But with that being said, that he was a real Rebbe, there's a major difference. And I'm not talking about politics with Aguda and Satmar here. I'm talking about culturally. There's a major difference between Satmar, which Rabbi Mertz was a Satmar Chassid. His father was one of the old Satmar Rav's best friends, and the Novominsker Rebbe, who was a Hasidic Rebbe. I'm not saying he wasn't a Hasidic Rebbe, but he was also really essentially a Litvish Rosh Yeshiva. He was part of the American culture, yeshivish culture. He wasn't, he wasn't a Rebbe of Hasidim in the sense of neither was Rabbi Mertz really. He wasn't a Rebbe of Hasidim in that sense either, but also there's difference, meaning there's cultural differences here. I mean, Rabbi Mertz was a Rebbe of Hasidim, but not in the sense that you think of, but he was bigger than like Stam a Rebbe, meaning you have a lot of Rebbe'ach, little Rebbes, who just have a shtibel and a handful of people daven there. It wasn't like that either, meaning he was a Rebbe, but there was two different things, meaning Rabbi Mertz was a Rebbe who people looked up to as a holy man, kind of like, not on the league with the Sklener Rebbe, but that type of, meaning that, meaning you weren't necessarily a Sklener Chassid, but you went to the Sklener Rebbe because he was a tzaddik, and he was, Sklener Rebbe was tzaddik Hador, and everybody went to him, So Rabbi Mertz, not everybody went to him. He wasn't like that, like Sklener Rebbe, and he also wasn't as old as Sklener Rebbe and so forth. But he was a person that everybody respected. Kind of, I'm thinking like Reb Michela from Netanya, Colonel Vracha, who was nifter a few years ago. Zlotchev Rebbe, who I was zeicher to see once. Even though he was a different type of personality, Rabbi Mertz was a very quiet person. And Reb Mechel was more a colorful person, but meaning he was a type of Rebbe that Satmar Hasidim would go to. That's meaning you were a Satmar Chassid, but you're going to go talk to Satmar Rebbe for everything. He's busy, so you go to another Rebbe, and Rabbi Mertz was that type of Rebbe, and he was very highly respected in the Satmar world by both communities, and that was also what was, special about him. He was very respected and a beloved figure, and he wasn't a Rebbe. He was a big Rebbe. He was, what I would call like a medium-sized Rebbe, meaning he wasn't a little Rebbe, and he was on the higher echelon of medium-sized Rebbes, not that it's our job to measure out who the Rebbes were, but he was a big tzaddik, he was a holy man, he was a very special person, and very highly respected. A lot of people were questioning, if one person on Twitter said something along the lines like, it was almost like they said, he was a very minor rabbi, according to this one person commenting on Twitter, and if it wasn't for the coronavirus, nobody would have come to his funeral. Someone was insinuating that. Someone said that outright, and I would say no. He would have had probably at least 5,000 people, maybe 10,000 people at his funeral, both in Brooklyn and in New Jersey, where he's buried next to his very respected father. And that was pretty much what from what I understand, what would have been. Meaning he was on that level that if there wasn't a coronavirus going on and he passed away, there probably would have been either 5,000 to 10,000 people at his funeral, because he was very respected in the community. And also, the fact was that a lot of people didn't know about the funeral. Meaning, people who lived in Williamsburg didn't know about the funeral because they were trying to keep it small. So again, two things could be now, but the thing is like, so people are asking, how was it that the Novominsker Rebbe, who was a much bigger figure, again, he had a much smaller synagogue and smaller yeshiva and anything than Rabbi Mertz had, but he had influence that was well beyond, because he was a manik, he was a leader of so many organizations, of Torah Masorah and Aguda and all these other organizations, that he was a leader of these organizations, and he was very well respected. But outside of the Hasidic world, how was it that this Rebbe, Novominsker Rebbe, was able to have a small funeral when he was more influential than Rabbi Mertz was? And Rabbi Mertz had such a relatively large funeral, which really, for him, was still a small funeral. And the thing is, again, if Novominsker Rebbe had passed away when it wasn't the coronavirus, I would imagine that 100,000 people could have come to his funeral. And he had an appeal that was a different culture, it was a different world. But the point is that in the yeshivish world, it's not as frowned upon to watch Torah anytime and these types of things online and so forth. It's more accepted. And he was really part of the yeshiva world more than he was part of the Hasidic world. First of all, he was Rosh Yeshiva in Ashkenaz yeshivas, not in Hasidic yeshivas. He was Rosh Yeshiva. He was Rosh Mesivta first in Breuers, then he was Rosh Yeshiva in Skokie, and then he was back in Breuers as Rosh Yeshiva, and then he opened his own yeshiva and he hired another yeshiva. And he had been a Rosh Yeshiva for many, many years. He was a real manhig, and he was a Talmud Chacham, and he was a Rebbe. But in a certain sense, what I would say is like in the way that Satmar Rav was Rosh Yeshiva also. Satmar Rav was, but that was the Hungarian tradition, is that which was really an old Ashkenaz tradition going back to Germany, was that you would be, if you were a Rav in a town, you had it's brought down in the Sfarim in Germany in the old days, 400 years ago, that a Rav of a town who was also a yeshiva had a koyach to give brachas. This is before the Baal Shem Tov, meaning this idea of a Rav being like a Hasidic Rebbe and giving brachas existed in Ashkenaz before. I mean, a lot of these things changed really when the Katschatz kind of, people got so offended by it that in Germany they totally took Kabbalah out of their milieu. And that's why I really say that the Hungarians maintained not the Hasidic tradition, but the old Ashkenaz tradition. The ways of the Chavos Yair, the ways of the Maharal in Prague, which the Chavos Yair was an enical from the Maharal, that a Rav had a koyach to give brachas, and the koyach was greater if he was Teifas Yeshiva. But anyway, Satmar Rav was, I would say, first and foremost a Rav, but he was also a Rebbe and a Rosh Yeshiva. But in a certain sense, the Novominsker Rebbe was really first and foremost a Rosh Yeshiva. I don't know if he was ever a Rav in a community. He was a Rebbe of his medrash. But like in the sense how, Rav Moshe Feinstein, we know him as Rosh Yeshiva, but he was a Rav in Russia, and most of the great Rosh Yeshiva at some point in their life served as a Rav of a community, or at least of a shul or something, meaning the famous Rosh Yeshiva that we know of in America, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky and so forth, Rav Moshe Feinstein, I believe Rav Aaron Kotler was also Rav in Kletsk, not just Rosh Yeshiva. I'm not sure about that. I I know Rabbi Yankov certainly was Rav Mordechai Gifter was a Rav in a shul before they were a yeshiva, and my Rosh Yeshiva were Rabbi Freilich Zolgazunstein. He was a Rav in a shul. And we're talking different thing. We're talking to the Gedolim. We're talking about my Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi Braunspiegel was a Rav in a few shuls. He's a world-class Rosh Yeshiva. I'm not, and Rabbi Freilich, a big tzaddik, and there's something you learn from being a Rav in a shul. But anyway, Novominsker Rebbe was Rosh Yeshiva, and then he was also a Rebbe. I'm not saying that to denigrate him, but I'm just saying it's a different culture. And he was a Rebbe. I mean, when you heard him speak, and when I heard him speak, it was a mystical experience. That's what I can say. It was an otherworldly. His face was transfigurated. It was something holy, otherworldly, supernatural. The spooky Hasidic stuff was going on there. And he was a Hartzigi, and he was, but he was an American who went to college. He went like I did. He went to secular college. Went to Brooklyn College. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not putting him. I'm just saying it's a different type of a culture. You're comparing apples and oranges. Everyone thinks I mean, Borough Park and Williamsburg are two different worlds, and within Borough Park, Novominsk is a different type of world than Bobov or Kloisenberg even, which are, more quote unquote modern than Satmar, but it's a different type of world. So and yet there's still more. Bobov and Kloisenberg have a lot more in common with Satmar culturally than they do with Novominsk or Ger, which is different, but also Ger Hasidim in America mostly speak English, and thinking, Bobov Hasidim also speak English, but it's a different type of an atmosphere in this. Anyway, I apologize if anyone thinks I am insulted the NYPD, and I apologize if I have to apologize to the police commissioner, or I don't think he had anything to do with it. I also don't want anyone to think that I'm saying that the mayor is anti-Semitic or even anti-Hasidic. I think he's a communist. I think his politics are 100% wrong. I wouldn't put it past him that he's, punishing the Hasidic community for voting for Trump a little bit. And I also wouldn't put it past him, like one of our friends said here, that he's trying to cover up his own lack of social distancing, trying to get the media attention away from that, which makes makes the most sense of exactly what's going on here. I'm not, and also I'm in no way justifying what happened with the funeral. I don't think it should have happened. I think it was wrong, and I applaud the synagogue for apologizing, and I hope we learn from this debacle not to do this anymore. But I think it was wrong, to be honest. I mean, there was a story in North Woodmere, I believe, or in Hewlett, somewhere in the Five Towns. There was one shul, a small shul, where everybody had the coronavirus already. Everybody's donating plasma. And they asked the rabbis in Five Towns, can we start having a minyan again? There's no reason for us not to have a minyan. And what they said is, as far as the virus is concerned, you're good. But the problem is, you could start a pogrom. Well, the problem is, when the nurses or doctors hear about this in the hospital, they might not treat people because they heard about this. So, meaning it's the optics issue. And again, it goes back to, which the Satmar should know about, it's the same problem with the Zionists. Meaning Zionists, they mean well, but they're killing Jews. And so it's the same thing here. I don't know if at this point, maybe earlier, yes. A month ago, yes, we had to be the socially distancing. By this time, there's another problem, because I mean, I work in a prison, I work in a mental hospital. I haven't visited the mental hospital in since Purim, but so 7 weeks now. But those places need to be protected because they're petri dishes. But the regular people and the healthy people and the old people need to be protected. Our Rav, also, we haven't seen him since Purim. He hasn't been in public since then. He's been, and Baruch Hashem, K'nai Nahara, he should have longer urine. He's staying healthy. But there's a problem, though, that we're not developing this herd immunity, which is important to any viral infection, to protecting it. So there's a problem here with maybe too much social distancing. But the thing is my suspicion is that a lot of those people who were there at the funeral probably had it already, whether asymptomatic or symptomatic, or got through it, this and that, and they're long done with it, and there's really no medical reason for them to social distance. However, there's still a political reason to social distance, meaning that in order to prevent anti-Semitism, to protect the community, to not upset our neighbors, they should not have had this big funeral. I don't believe it's really a medical issue. I believe but the thing is, also, there seems to be some kind of double standard, even though the mayor said it wasn't. But a 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute funeral, on one hand, and I don't think it's really that different than what was going on with people going out to watch the airplanes go over, which I didn't have a problem with either. I'm just saying you can't have the double standard. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. I didn't mean for this to go on so long. I just wanted to learn a little bit, but thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment. And again, apologies. I don't believe the mayor's anti-Semitic. I don't believe the NYPD as an institution is lazy. But still, there still has to be some questions answered and so forth. And I really applaud the Tolaz Yankov synagogue for issuing the apology that they did. That was really classy, and that was the right thing to do. All right, God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment. We'll see you later.